Okay. So this is how do you get started and how can us paddlers help? Because I think that's the key thing in paddling programs is lots of institutions don't necessarily have within their structure support. But us paddlers, we're always big on promotion. I'm not so in BC. I know quite a few of the paddling outfits in BC, and but unfortunately BC generally doesn't put as much money into sport as we do here in Alberta. And so I probably can't tell you how much help BC sport can provide in terms of finances, but I can make you jealous about what we get here in Alberta. I'm Mark, and you're? And you're from?
Here. I work at the Outdoor Center here.
You work at the Outdoor Center here too. So you taking Stephen's paddling course tomorrow?
I'm not.
See, I came all the way from Edmonton, 4.5 hours down the highway yesterday. It was slow. Ooh. And yeah, because I usually do it in 3 hours. And we're doing a kayak course tomorrow. And you could take it maybe if you've paddled.
I have to drive
back to
Florida.
Yeah, okay.
Do you have any paddling experience to do it?
You know, the course is actually designed for the lifeguard that has been in a kayak. So if you got a few hours in a kayak, you could do it.
I can't like wet exit or anything though. Like I don't know. You just need to be able to like be in a kayak oppositely. Okay. Maybe I'll do it then.
Yeah. So what I wanted to just suggest at this stage is what kind of paddling we're looking at and what resources and paddling agencies there are for support, what you require for facility, what equipment requirements there are, what kind of dollars are we talking about to getting into paddling, and how to keep your program going. And you know, I just asked the question because I was under the impression that U of C had a paddling club at least some point. The U of A did, and they had a unharmonious split with the university at a stage. And you know, there are institutions that have been able to maintain a long time relationship with volunteer paddlers, or as here at the U of C, run a long time program using mostly paid staff. So we'll look at those kind of questions. And if you have any questions, ask, because we're such a big group. So the kind of paddling that I'm mixed up with and our paddling associations are supporting right now are, of course, all kinds of open canoe programs. How's that look on this screen? Oh, good. Which we've been doing the longest. Whitewater kayaking, which we've been doing probably the second longest here in Alberta anyway. Kayak touring, which is getting to be relatively long in the tooth. And then our recent innovation, stand-up paddleboarding. So the organized paddlers in this province and across Canada support all of those. The big questions that we need to think about is how are you going to structure this program? For instance, as I said earlier, the University of Alberta had a very good paddling program that was entirely volunteer-based through a kayak club. Or do we run a program like here at the U of C, which is largely done with paid staff, right? Are you got a campus rec program, or is it continuing education? If you're starting a program, who's initiating it? Back in the old days, most of these programs were initiated by interested paddlers. That was certainly the case in Edmonton. And I sat through this camp session that was in here just before this and never did get to ask my question, why is your program interested? My sense is lots of these camp programs I was in and lots of campus rec public programs seems to be a capitalistic component to them, making a little money for the, right? You all have some requirement to put a little money back into the faculty or the university or whoever your administration is. Yes. So why are we doing that? And then you need to think about, who's the program for? Students, staff already on the campus, alumni. Is it the public? Are you going to run adult programs, kid programs, camp programs, summer camp programs? And how is it funded? Is it, it's really simple to start a soccer program, eh? Soccer's so good, a ball. You don't even need a field with lines. Well, paddling programs are a little more expensive, and you got to think about it. Is there seed money, ongoing operating? Do you get to run at a loss? Do you have to run at a profit? So these are the questions you need to sort out well in the planning process. And some of this has been done for you, as you will see as we go along here. And are we strictly looking at participant skill, fun, recreation, or are you going to get into instructor leader programs? Do you service a broader community? And I will be talking about Paddle Canada and Canoe Kayak Canada programs here at that instructor leader, which you both probably want to use for certifying staff and volunteers, or maybe you want to offer them, just as Stephen's doing this pool kayak instructor course tomorrow. And then paddling programs require water. We were just talking about the lack of pool at UBC Okanagan, but lots of lakes there. And what kind of lakes are we talking about? Running a program on Lake Okanagan may have some weather difficulties, but if you got an old gravel pit, as I've often taught on around the province, geez, they're always sheltered because they're always deep. They're not too big. You don't get big waves. There's lots of places that aren't very demanding. Well, even here in Calgary, you guys at least used to use the gravel pits down in, is it Carvin Park in the southeast? Yeah, but I understand the river flowed through it last year, so I don't know if you're back to paddling through it again. And then, well, how big are your programs? Are you going to go off campus? Are you going to go traveling? I mean, you guys are campus. You guys still do programs out on the West Coast? Yeah. And some of your canoe programs go to northern Saskatchewan?
Yeah, I don't know about Saskatchewan.
Well, I know Logan's gone all the way to the, I got to think of the river that flows into Lake Winnipeg. No, it comes in from the east, out of northern Ontario. But we won't worry about it. It's a long ways away. So, how far are you prepared to take your programs? Whereas, I don't think, did we ever say, I teach at Grant MacEwan, or have taught at Grant MacEwan for 30 years, and we have a very modest paddling program at 2 levels. We do some public ed courses, and I do the credit programming too within the physical education degree program. And so we limit our travel, even within my credit program, we limit our travel to about 75 minutes from campus. I try not, because I never get away for longer in a weekend. I always think you should be paddling longer than you should be driving. That's rule 1. So, I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities. So I went to a presentation that had a graphic like this, and I thought it was a good idea. I mean, there's just all kinds of things you can be doing, and there's some things in there that we haven't even discussed, and I probably won't discuss too much today, like, Leave No Trace. We have a very good Leave No Trace program across North America, actually, because it's an American program that we've inherited. And, it's got canoeing and kayaking and desert and river and mountain kind of components to it. It's a great program. If you get into serious paddling, you got to think about river rescue. And yeah, so there's all kinds of stuff. And then, of course, the other thing, I mean, here at University of Calgary, you got this great big rental program that we're all envious of. I actually started the rental program at the University of Alberta a real long time ago. It died along the way, but that was the football team's fault, not mine. It died long after I'd left. So there are lots of things you need to think about. So for the kind of programs that I would see happening on university campuses, college campuses. Where are we from? We got a couple of... You're from Vic? Oh, both of you? Oh. Well, we just had a very nice presentation here from one of your colleagues. Shauna? Yeah. Your boss? Your boss? Shauna, your boss? Oh, okay. Oh! So, yeah, 3 BC types here. What's that?
I went to UVic.
Well, you went to UVic, but you're working... Yeah. That's okay. It's okay to migrate back. Not all Canadian radicals have to butt up against the Pacific Ocean. So the big 2 outfits are Paddle Canada, which looks after recreational canoeing, kayaking, and stand-up paddleboarding, and Canoe Kayak Canada, and the side of that I'm mostly mixed up with is the whitewater side. Canoe Kayak Canada also represents our sprint paddlers and marathon canoe, which are strictly competitive programs. Whitewater has more of a recreational program and a competitive side, as you'll see here in another slide soon. And then here at the province, we have Paddle Alberta that looks after the recreational canoeing, some kayaking, and stand-up paddleboarding, the Alberta Whitewater Association. In BC, of course, you've got the BCR, British Columbia Recreational Canoe Association, Recreational Canoe Association of BC, RCABC, yes. And you have BC Whitewater that ties it, which is part of Canoe Kayak BC. So they will be running virtually these same programs. RCABC has a very old educational program that ties into Paddle Canada, but is somewhat still independent. It takes a long time for these things to merge. So, both Paddle Canada and CKC have a paddler development program and have the instructor, leader, coach program. Paddle Canada tends to refer to theirs as instructors and instructor trainers. CKC has bought pretty much into the National Coaching Certification Program, and so they like to refer, they have to refer to their leaders as learning facilitators and coaches. So, the CKC Paddler program just came out a couple years ago. There are 9 levels, 3 levels at fundamentals, and you all recognize where that comes from. And 3 levels at developmentals, 3 levels at transformations. It was envisaged as primarily a youth program, but it's a good program outline for anybody to use, as you will see shortly. And it's pretty well developed with participant completion cards. We're going to see them here shortly. I've pulled out 3 of the cards to take a look at. So this is the program, as you might notice here, is Paddle Sport Passport program. This is the Fundamentals 1, and all of the kinds of things that you can be doing in the pool at this initial stage. So this is the kind of things that we're going to be looking at tomorrow in the pool kayak instructor program. And, you know, you can see that not only is the program about paddling, but, you know, right from the beginning, we talk a little bit about fitness, talk a little bit about leadership, talk a little bit about stewardship, and a little bit about equipment and gear. Because paddling's a lot about equipment and gear, unfortunately. So that's kind of the first level. Here we are in the middle of transformation. So we've gone through a couple levels of flat water, introduction to moving water, and we're getting into a little more advanced, into a little bit of whitewater with the kids. And it's amazing how young some kids are paddling pretty serious whitewater. And then at the final level of transformations, we're migrating into the competitive aspects. And you will, I don't think we've pretty much got past it, but whitewater canoeing also has this little side aspect known as canoe polo. Except canoe really means kayak. And so you'll see kayak polo if you ever look at the whole thing built into this, and it's a great way. I think actually most of the clubs end up doing some kayak polo in the wintertime in the pools, and of course most of the paddlers use it just as a fun way to stay in shape. But here we got all of the kind of whitewater stuff, and you see these guys are into slalom. You also see that to complete this, not only do you paddle kayak, but you got to paddle some C1 and C2, as you can probably see right there in that middle stretch. There's a C2. Any questions there on the? So the Canoe Kayak Canada Whitewater Leadership Development Program. There are essentially two sides to it. There's the competition stream, which follows that introduction to competition, developmental stage that we have in the NCCP model. And then Whitewater is kind of bastardized the rest of the NCCP program. If you're familiar with the NCCP program, we have the kind of elite sports stream, and we have a community sports stream, and we have an instructional stream. Well, Whitewater has taken the community sport and the instructional stream, and they've said community sport is leading trips, and the instructional stream is for teaching paddling. So, and they're combined at the first level, which is the pool and lake kayak instructor. So if you become a lake kayak instructor or coach, you're also a leader for flatwater paddling. And then when we get to the river, you can see the split between the river leadership versus the river skill instruction. And they kind of work back and forth all the way up, as it kind of shows here. And Whitewater is kind of kept separate, their Swiftwater Rescue Program. So everything that you kind of need is there, and probably for a campus rec program, you wouldn't need more than the Kayak Leader 2 program for your staff, because that gets you into essentially up to paddling Class 3 water, which is probably about as far as your insurance company wants you to go. Though we're going to talk about insurance here in a little bit. And I should say this kayak program for flatwater and river has been jointly developed by Paddle Canada and Canoe Kayak Canada. So it's a relatively new program. We only introduced it in May 2012 out in Ontario. And so they recognize each other. They also make you pay money to both of them, so the registry fee is a little steep. $120 for your first year. Any questions there on the CKC leadership development? The Alberta Whitewater Association does this for us. And some of these things you can buy into, or by taking out a membership you receive at relatively low cost. Leadership development, of course, and probably one of the biggest reasons to get mixed up with your provincial sport association may tie into how you want to cover your insurance. And especially if you run your program as an independent club, they can get their insurance through the provincial association, and that's both the case in BC and Alberta. So, you know, that's something you want to think about, and you want to check, of course, if your liability insurance. I'm sure that's an age-old problem that's been sorted out here in Calgary. In Alberta, you would use the Alberta Whitewater Association. In BC, you would go to the BC Whitewater people or the RCA BC if you're running a canoe program. Or you can go to Paddle Canada, which your instructor would actually do.
And as an instructor, you'd be insured through Paddle Canada?
Yes.
And that way you could run, do that under Paddle Canada.
Yes.
But if you're reading this association, it's only for Whitewater.
Yes. Yep. Yep. Yeah. So yeah, it depends on what you're doing. Clubs tend to be a little bit more specific, whereas, of course, recreation programs, you're a little broader. And the only probably have the longest certification set of requirements. It takes the longest to become certified as a Paddle Canada instructor, depending how far you want to go.
Yeah, I'm coming from the perspective of a pool programmer wanting to put stuff in.
Sure.
So general.
Yeah. In which case, you know, we can probably, if you're running this, you know, primarily as a pool program, I mean, your liability insurance is probably covered, and the quickest way would be to put your staff through this pool kayak instructor program. You know, and that would cover you for a basic intro kayak program. Whitewater here in Alberta looks after a series of paddle fests over the summer, which is a great way. In my canoe, we run all kinds of introductory programs, but we don't have the critical mass to run more advanced stuff. So we send our members off to the paddle fest because there's always instructional and touring programs over the weekend or long weekend. And so that lets our club members go and get some more advanced training without us really having to do the programming or worry about it or developing the critical mass, or that worst case scenario, planning a program and then having to cancel it because you don't get more than 2 or 3 people. And the other two things that we do here in the Alberta Whitewater Association is, of course, the competitive side, and we're also big into facility development. We're really big into facility development right now because Mother Nature just washed them all away last year. The Kananaskis, Harvey Passage here in town, the Boulder Run down on the Old Man River. Well, the best example I can think of in BC, and I'm not sure where it's at right now because I haven't been there for years, is Capilano Canyon. You know, they had a fairly semi-permanent slalom site in Cap Canyon. And that would have been done by and they had one up on the Chilliwack too for a while. I'm not sure where those are. So, you know, here in Calgary, like the Harvey Passage, where we tried to eliminate the drowning machine, the weir, irrigation weir, you know, that was a $16 million project, and the paddlers kind of got it started, and then the Calgary Foundation and Calgary Parks and Alberta Environment took over and screwed it up. But we'll see what happens with the redevelopment. The Kananaskis River has been done entirely by the whitewater people, though the stand-up paddleboarders have got into it lately, and river surfers